It occurred to me recently that in the book of Acts, whenever followers of Jesus said goodbye to each other in order to go and bring the good news to another place, they always did it in public, except when they were on the run from the law. Then it was in secret at night. But other than that, which is not the case here, they did it on beaches and in front of people. And we were talking this morning in our team meeting that maybe that was to show people in their community what they meant to each other, because you really only find out some of that stuff when there's a party and people tell you how they feel about you and what you've meant in their lives. So we felt like, let's go big and go public with this and show people what we mean to each other. When I first met Jeff, he and Erica weren't even dating. He was in Bible college. He actually recruited me to speak at an event that he was running for the college, which we did, and that's how we got to know each other. He spent a week in the back of our Volvo, driving through the night in Ohio, long story, and ended up joining our leadership team here and has been with us since the very early days when our church started around our dining room table at our house down on Stewart Street in Berkeley. I told Jeff a couple of things when we were in those early conversations. One was, if you want to come and be here for more than a couple of years, you probably shouldn't come. Because the point of the enterprise is to tie people to the railroad tracks so the Jesus train can run over them. In other words, to have your life disrupted by the intervention of God and want to do something crazy. Even if it's just to stay in your current occupation and do it from a different angle that the Lord gives you, that's one of the things we do. It's not the only thing we do, but it's one of the things we do. So he kind of liked the sound of that. And I also told him that you can go to a big church with a safe job that has a dental plan, or you can man up and come here and do something dangerous. So you can man up Berkeley, big church, little girl. You know, it's a simple choice. It's a simple choice. And so he decided he wanted to try something dangerous, and Erica was brave enough to join him in that undertaking, married him in the middle, caught a moving train, jumped on board, and also ended up here in Berkeley. So that's how we ended up at this moment. Now that was all a couple of years ago. Can you believe that 2 years has gone by so fast? This place, our church, has only officially been open for a little over 11 months. And so we're already sending out our first couple that's going to create a new congregation in less than a year. I feel pretty good about that. I think that's a great thing that you guys have done, and it's because of the culture that you guys create by what you bring to this environment and to your friendships with each other. So that's how it all happened, and I'm going to turn it over to Janet now to talk about some of the things that happened along the way.
You know, I thought of a scripture recently about Jesus, how he didn't come to be served, but he came to serve. And whoever wants to be great among you, let him be your servant. And so when I think of this verse, I think about Jeff and Erica and the servant's heart that they have. And this is I could say a lot about them this morning, but this is one of the things I want to focus on is that legacy that they're leaving for us, that whole servant's heart. And for those of you who don't know them or probably new here, Jeff and Erica just do everything, and pretty much everything there is to do. And they do coffee in the morning, and and they set up and they do the cookies. They've just been such servants. And when I think about when I see Erica make the coffee, now she could just say, I'm really sorry, I can't make the coffee today because I have a master's degree at the seminary, and I just don't think I can do that. So she could do that, but no, I don't hear that at all. I don't hear any whining. She just goes and does this thing. And Jeff, I don't even know how many boxes he's carried up the stairs. And he comes here every day. And I could just go on and on about all the things. And not to mention buying all of this furniture and decorating, and Erica's, her expertise in this, I call it memory wall over here, you'll see. So those of you who are new today, you might want to look at this wall. It kind of has a little story of our church. And so it's just been just amazing watching them work behind the scenes. And really, when we think about it, how many know, maybe you don't know, but how many know that's what the ministry is doing all of those things. And I was talking to Randy today, who, by the way, was making the coffee, and we were talking, what a privilege What a privilege it is to serve God, whether you make coffee. In fact, they were greeters when we were back at the hotel. They were the first ones to be outside the door when people came to the Hotel Durant. And so all of these things that they've done, and what a servant's heart and what a legacy they are leaving us today. And so we will really miss them.
So my name is Ben, for those of you guys who don't know. I am coming into my last year at Cal, so I'm an undergrad, and as Pastor Earl just told you, the church has been open officially for 11 months, but it's been, before that 11 months, there was a period of like a year or two when this church was kind of in the works, getting started. We were meeting, I think that one of the first meetings, which I wasn't there at, was at Pastor Earl and Janet's house, and then they moved to the Hotel Durant to meet in a conference room. So we met in a hotel conference room every Sunday for a period of, I don't know, something like a year or so, give or take, 3 months. And so the very first service that I came to at 360 was on Easter Sunday at the Hotel Durant conference room. And I came to that service in large part because of Jeff. And Jeff doesn't know this, but he was, so there was a video that was posted online about 360 Church, and there was I think it was like a 30 or 40 minute video. It was a long video of Jeff just telling a story. And this story was about Jeff coming to Berkeley once he had known that he was going to come and help out with the church. So he'd come to Berkeley and stayed with this group of, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 guys in this like huge, like, fancy house. One of the guys was like an entrepreneur. I think maybe even the other guys were as well. I can't forget the details, but it was Jeff telling the story of him staying with this group of 3 or 4 guys, and through the course of I don't know, maybe like 6 to 9 months or however long it was that he stayed there, Jeff opened up the gospel to 3 or 4 guys who had never had like any exposure to the gospel necessarily, or at the very least had been disconnected completely with any sort of faith-based or spiritual life. And I remember seeing that video and hearing Jeff tell this story, and thinking to myself, this is the kind of guy that I would want to be around at Berkeley. The kind of guy who would, in the course of less than a year, be able to open up the gospel, open up the good news about Jesus Christ to people who would never have even considered living a life following Christ. And I think my goal in coming to Berkeley was to learn how to share the love of God with people. And in watching this 30 or 40 minute clip, I saw a guy who had done that. And so coming into 360 Church for the first time, the biggest motivation for me to do that was to be around people who could do what Jeff did. And so I remember when Jeff came for the first time, or I met Jeff for the first time, it was at Cafe Milano. It was in a little small cafe. It was like after one of our services in the Hotel Durant. There were like, I don't know, maybe less than 10 of us. And Jeff was sitting there cracking jokes left and right, as he always does. If you've ever met him, this is like Jeff. And I can't remember if Erica was there or not. I think she was. And I remember Erica sitting next to Jeff and just like kind of smiling at Jeff as he's like cracking all these jokes. And I remember sitting across the table from him and just thinking, you have no idea, but I'm here because of you. And so I want you to know that. And it's made all the difference in my life the last couple years. And I am fully confident that the mission of Jeff and Erica planting a church in Chicago to reach millennials is God has picked the perfect people to do that. And I know that's true starting off from the very first video I saw of him and through the last like year or two that I've gotten to know you. Jeff and Erica, you guys are the perfect people to go reach people for Christ in Chicago. So.
So we watched the video too.
And we saw that same video.
We didn't really, at least for me, it wasn't as much of a spiritual experience as it was hilarious. So it was more, and we were going through a move at the time, so it was more of this, wow, these people get what we are going through and how hard it is to find housing out here sometimes. So anyway, it wasn't quite as profound as yours. But it was part of the reason that we came. We're like, wow, these people are normal, you know, they understand. But then we got to know you. No, I'm just kidding. So, but one of the things that I really appreciate about both of you is that you are so authentic and real, and have been willing to share of yourselves with us and with other people in the church. That's been really awesome for us to be able to make real friendships here in Berkeley, and that's something that we've been really hungry for, and just really appreciate finding that in the both of you. And Alan, I think, is going to talk more about some of that, but two things that I really appreciate about Erica in particular. One is just your eye for design and the artistic, and concepts that are completely foreign to me. So it's really fascinating for me to watch how it seems like you can just look at a room and be able to like put things in it and like make it look pretty and neat and clean, but also really inviting.
Yeah, if we would have done that for the church, this would look like Home Depot.
I mean, something practical and functional, and then you're done, you know. But I mean, you bring things to the environment that make it warm and inviting, and that you want to be there. So I really appreciate that. And then also, I really appreciate your mind for research and teaching, and just some of the insights that you've brought to Bible study or to the women's retreat, where then we had an earthquake. But things that, your master's thesis and who God is and what the fear of God really means and what it doesn't mean. That's been really things that have spoken to me personally and helped me to grow closer to God. And I'm excited to see how God will continue to work in you and through you in that aspect. And I'm excited for the PhD.
Just to add, we really appreciate your friendship. I think we were looking for authentic friends in Berkeley for about 3 years. And then we found you too, and that was a good start. And then we have the whole church. So thank you very much. Started with the classic sci-fi night, and then you let us haul you to the top of Yosemite, where our car gets attacked by a large owl. We've had some good adventures, or hiking back in the pitch black of night. Lots of fun. One thing I appreciate about Jeff is that you're able to be friendly and real with everyone you come in contact with. And as a more academic introvert myself, I can usually manage 3 or 4 people, and then I'm a hissing cat and I run under the couch. So it's been really neat to be able to see that kind of skill, and it'll be quite helpful expanding the ministry out in Chicago. So to close in high school yearbook fashion, we love you guys. Never change, and have a neat summer.
Well, obviously, we're leaving that video online for a long time, and then we'll just explain when people come that they're not here anymore. It's a major thing. I guess my contribution to this list would be, you may not be aware of how many things Jeff and Erica have started here at 360, both large and small. They pioneered the tradition of going to midnight premieres of major action movies, so that's been huge for us. They've also were the pioneering home for our 360 Homes network of home Bible studies. And that was just a group of 1, so that's kind of the smallest unit of a network you can have, but it was the beginning of that whole thing. Their hospitality really made that happen. as well as Amy referenced, the design of everything that you see around here was all something that Erica did for us and picked out everything. We took one massive shopping trip to IKEA and bought all the furniture, and here it is. So that's all to say, if you subtract these two guys from who we are, we're a lot less without them here. And it's just good to know that there are some people really worth knowing, you know, who really are such a great friend, and also just so great to have around to build up a group in its sense of mission. This morning, we've asked Jeff to bring the talk, and he's agreed to do that. So I'm going to ask you to stand for just a second as he comes, and if you'll give him a rousing 360 standing ovation.
Earl has started sitting in a stool when he gives a talk, and so my whole life is about encompassing it around how Earl does his. I even thought about wearing a bow tie this morning, but I thought that might be a little too far and creepy, so I did this. But recently, I've been thinking a lot about how we write the script to our own movies. You know, there's always obviously someone higher than us who sits in the director's chair, but for the most part, we create the screenplay. We decide the plot, the characters, the setting, and even the conflict with the way that we live our lives. And I blame this train of thought mostly on my obsession for movies, but also the Steve Jobs biography that I've been reading. And reading the story about somebody else's life, it gets me to think a lot about my own. You know, like it gets me to examine and reflect on the previous chapters of my own life, my own biography. It gets me to think about chapters just like this. When I was a senior in college, I was elected as student body president, so part of my responsibilities were to organize this retreat for student leaders and for the faculty of our college. And so we had to book a speaker, and as soon as we did, I met with him at a local Starbucks. And I got there a little bit early because I wanted to make a good impression. And while I was waiting, in my mind, I kept running through all the things that people told me about this guy, about how he was a big deal, and about the books that he had written, and how intelligent he was. And my hands started to get sweaty. And so I started rubbing him on my jeans, and when I did, he came through the glass doors. And I don't know how, but when I saw him, I knew that he was the right person for the job. It was Earl. And he came in, and we got coffee, and we started talking. And the more and more that we were talking, the more and more I fell in love with this guy, platonically speaking. And so Earl and Janet came to this retreat, and they spoke about Berkeley, how they were approached through an email with the possibility of planting a church there. They were given the opportunity to turn nothing into something, and they were confronted with this issue. If they were to do this, Earl would have to leave his job as a professor and the director of the doctoral program at the Assemblies of God Theological Seminary. It meant that Earl and Janet would have to leave their dream home built in the wooded Ozarks and move across the country to California. And when they spoke about how when they first visited Berkeley, they had this plan to use spiritual language to defy the will of God by saying, we feel 2 checks in our spirit that this is not for us. And they talked about the first time they visited the campus of Cal. They walked around and how they had these expectations. They had these thoughts that they would see the National Guard bombing the student body with tear gas in front of Sprout Plaza. And how they thought they would see the Rolling Stones playing on the lawn in front of the dean's office. And how they expected to see a group of engineering students, maybe on a park bench, rolling a joint the size of a trash can. But instead, what they observed was a flood of students in between classes, all of them having not much to do with anyone else and having white wires hanging from their ears. And Earl and Janet started to think, they knew that Berkeley was one of the most creative places in the nation, maybe even the world. Because as goes Berkeley, so goes the nation. They started to think about what could happen if these people who create the future, fell into the hands of the Almighty Creator. A presentation like this left me and my friends salivating. What a vision. And then after the retreat, Earl and Janet came up to me, and Earl said, I know that you have some opportunities once you graduate, and if you want to do something safe, that's fine. But if you want to do something dangerous, you could come with us and be a part of this church plant in Berkeley. And right there, at that moment, I introduced new conflict into my screenplay. The plot thickened, and I had some wrestling to do. A similar thing happened long ago when Jesus thickened the plot. He gave the people something to wrestle with. Think of a large parade of people, all in favor of Jesus versus the establishment. You can almost feel the crowd beginning to swell. Our story picks up in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14, verse 25, and it says just this. Now great crowds accompanied him, and he turned and he said to them. If you have to turn to a crowd like this, it means that you're not facing them. So you can imagine Jesus leading this big crowd, and they're behind him, and you don't just turn and speak to people for no reason. Usually there's a reason behind this, right? So you can almost kind of feel the murmuring in the background. Maybe Jesus could even hear people saying things like, do you know this guy? He fed 5,000 people with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. If you go with him, you'll never go hungry. He is the Son of God. If you follow him, God will forgive you of everything, and you can do whatever you want. You can have your cake and eat it too. Jesus is the perfect accessory to your life. And Jesus hears this and says, wait, what? No. It's actually the opposite of what you think. He says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Now some of you look at that and you think, man, I'm closer to God than I thought. I hate my parents. That's not exactly what this is saying. The connotation for hate today is different back then. Today we think about an emotion rooted in anger and bitterness, but back then it meant to simply turn away from. So in a sense, Jesus is using hyperbole. He's saying, you are called to love me and love the Father so much that in comparison, it looks as if you hate your family and your own life. You know, we think about things in priorities. A lot of times we make these lists of priorities, how there's God, and then there's family, and then there's work or school, and then there's social life. We think we say phrases like we have to keep our priorities in order, right? And Jesus says, no, there is no list. There's just this. And that's all. Priority. It says, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. In Walter Isaacson's account of Steve Jobs' life, he talks about this climactic moment known as the Pepsi Challenge. Around 1983, when Apple was on the rise of its success, they needed a new president. And so Steve Jobs became pretty chummy with a guy named John Sully, who happened to be the president of the Pepsi-Cola division. And at one point, Jobs asks Sully if he would consider leaving Pepsi and joining Apple. And Sully wrestles with this for a while and comes back to Jobs with a suggestion that maybe he could stay at Pepsi but just give Apple pointers and suggestions and advice from the sidelines. And Isaacson records that Steve Jobs looked into the eyes of John Sully and he said, do you really want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water? Or do you want a chance to change the world? Do you want to stay where you're at and be safe? Or do you want to do something dangerously world-changing? When I read that chapter, I thought, that sounds familiar. Like it happened before. It did. It happened to me. And just like how I couldn't explain when Earl came to me and we had this conversation after the retreat that he spoke at, I couldn't explain how it wasn't just a conversation. It's more. Yeah, Earl asked me upon graduation if I wanted to join him and Janet in Berkeley, but it was like God was using his words to ask me an even deeper question. What kind of life are you going to live? What kind of script are you going to write? A safe, simple, and easy one that you could do completely on your own, or an obediently dangerous one that would require you to depend on the one who sits in the director's chair? You see, when you allow God to sit in the director's chair, not only does he get priority and prominence over your movie, but in fact, he even redefines what it's even about. But Jesus can't just say one thing to us one way, right? He knows we're sheep and we need to hear it multiple times in multiple ways. So he tries to reach out to a certain kind of people group. And he goes on to say this. For which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. God expects us to be able to weigh the pros and cons of a situation before mindlessly jumping into it, right? We must think about possible problems before they even happen. It's like getting into a relationship. You don't enter into commitment without weighing the pros and cons, right? And if the couple is smart, they will sit down and they will think about possible scenarios before they happen. They'll think about how to handle things so that when they do happen, it's already sealed. They might ask questions like, what are the expectations here? Or maybe if it's before they're married, they might ask questions like, how far is too far? What if this? What if that? When I finally decided to let God sit in the director's seat of my movie, I moved here to Berkeley. And like Earl said, I lived in a big, big house way, way up in the hills with 3 other guys that I barely knew. I met them on Craigslist. They ran a multi-million-dollar company that officed the 3rd floor of the Wells Fargo building just down Shattuck Avenue, right before the BART station. And it was while I lived with these young, aggressive entrepreneurs that turned our garage into a warehouse for porn that I decided to jump on a plane and fly across the country to where Erica was attending grad school. And it was there that I proposed to my best friend. And I know at one point she had to wonder about my OCD tendencies. Back then it was way worse than they are now. Everything had its proper place and folded, and it was lines in the carpet vacuum, very straight. It was terrible. And so I know at one point before she married me, she had to ask a question that sounded something like this: can I really handle this? Which is a question all of us should ask ourselves. Whether you're going to Berkeley, preparing to get married, or getting accepted into some sort of graduate program. That's what's happening here. Jesus confronts the group, the crowd of unreflective enthusiasts. He says, examine yourself and ask, can you really handle this? And so the reason this talks about a tower is because he's reaching out to a certain kind of people group, people who raise crops and works on plantations. They would build towers and they would look out at night and see if people would be coming to steal from them, or animals would be coming to pick at vegetation. And this way they could scare them off or even wound them if they wanted to. So as Jesus reaches out to this people group, he's got to go to the other end of the spectrum and reach out to the other, right? So he goes on and he says this, or, in verse 31, what king going out to encounter another king in war will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is still a great way off, he sends out a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Being a disciple of Jesus means that you give up everything, when in any other case you wouldn't have to. Now, this doesn't mean that you give all your possessions to the poor right away and you become homeless or a panhandler yourself, but it does mean that you offer everything back up to where it came from, God. And then God can decide whether or not to have you give it away or to use it for Him in another way. See this word up here? It says, any one of you who does not give all that he has. That word all is the Greek word pasin. It means all or everything or the whole. So when we think about this, sometimes we think about possessions, things that we can hold with our hands. But this says all, everything, even things you can't hold with your hands. Your mind and your body, your soul, your health, your spirit, everything. So take out things, possessions, and let's plug in something else like talents. You wouldn't throw away a talent because you thought God was putting you on a guilt trip, right? No, you would use that talent for God. See, I'm convinced that the Bible is a lot less negative than we think it is, and it's a lot more positive than we think it is. If you like to sing, don't give up your gift and dream of singing for God. Use your gift and dream of singing for God. We all have things. We all have things that work together as the body of Christ. And even though we use all these things for God, there's still this sense of sacrifice, right? This sense that we need to give something up. And that's because when you go all in on something, it's the hardest transition that you'll ever encounter. Whether you're training for the Olympics, getting ready to get married, planting a church, or even just becoming a disciple of Jesus. Because when you go all in on something, it will involve you analyzing, prioritizing, even recognizing that there is a cost. When you go all in on something, it will require you to give up something that in any other case you wouldn't have to. So are you willing to allow God to sit in the director's seat of your movie? Are you willing to give up something you don't have to? These are the kind of questions that Erica and I have been asking ourselves. Just a few months ago, something started to happen. Something new, something disruptive, something familiar. This thing, I felt it once before. It was when Earl came to me with the Divine Berkeley rendition of the Pepsi Challenge. It was when I was asked whether or not I had what it took, what I wanted to do with my life, what kind of script I was going to write. And so, in thinking about all this, it seemed like all at once, lots of people I knew from high school and growing up started to come in contact with us. You know, they knew what we studied, and so after catching up, they would ask questions about spirituality and things like that. And I don't know, something happened in my heart. It kind of started to grow. I started to become very concerned for these people's spiritual lives. I started to wonder if God wanted us to do something about this. I started becoming so caring towards them that I started having dreams, and these dreams would turn into nightmares. And in these nightmares, I could see these people in a dark place in complete separation from God. And I could see their faces turn to me and say, "How come you never told us?" And at that point, you can't really ignore something like that. And if you do, you're a bad person. I've said that before. And so I started to wonder, okay, God, what are we supposed to do about this? I thought I knew what that meant, but I guess I was scared. And Erica, having all the faith in the world, was on board with this from the very beginning, to my shame. But in my mind, I started to see a magic show. I started to see the disappearing act. And I knew about this because Earl had said it happened to him when he came to Berkeley. The disappearing act is when, in your mind, you reach out for things that are important to you, and it disappears in a puff of smoke. So I started to think, my Facebook profile, current city, Berkeley, California, gone. A 6th-floor apartment that looks out to San Francisco, gone. All-day hiking with Alan and Amy in Yosemite, gone. Midnight movie premieres with Earl, gone. Gut-busting laughter in the middle of the night with Churro, gone. Everything about here, gone. But I couldn't get away from what was making my heart beat. And so I told Earl about it from the beginning. And when I told him, he said, you know, it's funny, because this morning, I was just thinking that you and Erica would be good to plant in Chicago. And so after turning down a couple of staff positions in the Chicagoland area for churches, that's exactly what we decided to do. To plant a church, to start a new kind of community where it would be safe for people to come and explore, safe for people to wrestle with their own faith, to calculate, to count the cost, to see if they had what it took to allow God to sit in the director's chair. And they could be a part of a community. We expand the kingdom. We feel like God's directing us to expand the kingdom by planting this church. Right now, it's our turn. But soon, it'll be yours. And this is why I feel like we kind of write the scripts to our own movies. The question is, what kind of script will you write? Let's pray. God, thank you so much, Lord, for all that you do. God, I pray that we would become familiar with the disruption. God, I pray that we would be open. I pray that, God, you would send us. Send us to do great things to make disciples and to expand your kingdom. We love you. We love you so much and ask that you would be with us. We ask that you would catch us as we take a dive into knowing what it is for you to sit in the director's seat, for our movie reel to play, and for us to look back on chapters and not have any regrets, just knowing that we spent every day of the week living for you, and we would never do anything to change it.